To blitz or not to blitz? That is Jeff Hafley's question.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play. Theo Ash joins us on the show today. Theo is one of the hosts of the Stay Hot podcast. You can also find his work over at the Pro Football Network. You've heard him on the Mina Kimes podcast. And I think he's one of the up-and-coming football analysts on the internet that we have. He also happens to be a Packers fan. So we're going to talk to him about Jeff Hafley. We're going to talk to him about Jordan Love and a lot of different things leading into this Packers-Eagles game, the way the Packers can and should attack the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we get there, though, I just want to mention, because this is our Friday show, the Packers play tonight, that some injuries to watch here for the Philadelphia Eagles in particular. We know Devin White didn't even make the trip. So you have now a linebacker group that was a problem before. They add Devin White and Zach Bond, and now Devin White can't even go. Now they did the ass covering thing and said, well, he wasn't gonna be the guy anyway. Okay, are you sure about that? Like, are you super sure about that? Okay, maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. The linebacker group is still just not very good. Isaiah Rodgers was going to start on the boundary, or at least in nickel was going to be the boundary corner. They're going to play priority nickel, so technically a starter on the boundary, even though Quinion Mitchell was going to be the opposite boundary corner with Darius Slay. But in nickel, Quinion Mitchell was going to play the slot. If you're confused, I understand. It's sort of like when Casey Hayward was the starting boundary corner. Technically, he was the starting boundary corner, but then Demarius Randall played the boundary. In a nickel, Casey Hayward slid inside. Quinion Mitchell is going to play inside. Without Isaiah Rodgers, now you have Kelee Ringo, who's going to have to play the boundary in nickel. And Kelee Ringo is a developmental player, someone who it seemed like was going to get first-round buzz, did not play his best his last year at Georgia. And if anyone likes Georgia players as much as Brian Gutekunst, it's Howie Roseman. So you have a rookie nickel corner, a subpar mediocre linebacker room, and then a safety room that re-adds C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but is otherwise particularly uninspiring. And this on a group that last year, at the end of the year, was just not ready for prime time in terms of the run defense or the pass rush. Now you're going to get fresh Jalen Carter, you're going to get fresh Jordan Davis, but it's also early in the season, so are these guys going to be up to the task of playing 60, 80 defensive snaps? And the answer is, in the case of Jordan Davis especially, no, that's just not what they ask him to do. When you have this corner group, though, you're already relying on a thin group. And now the Packers, if they want to, can say, I don't know, put 4 guys out there. Make Cooper DeJean play, who Vic Fangio has said is not ready. Test Quinion Mitchell from the slot, who I think was a very good player. He was someone I said I wanted the Packers to draft. But Vic Fangio is playing a different style of defense. They're going to lean into a little bit more zone coverage, a little more quarters coverage than the Packers are. They're going to be a primary man coverage team. I thought that was the best place for Quinion Mitchell to play, was on a man-centric team. Now he's going to play in the slot, a 6'1", 200-pound corner. I know he has the movement skills for it, but like, Is that the best place for him? I think this is an opportunity for the Packers to attack the Eagles, especially in the middle of the field. And so this is a meaningful injury. There aren't any of those on the Packers side right now. Tucker Kraft is questionable. Marshawn Lloyd is questionable. Emmanuel Wilson is questionable, but they all practiced in some form or fashion all week. I would expect them all to be available, or at least Emmanuel Wilson and Tucker Kraft. We'll see about Marshawn Lloyd, who didn't get a lot of training camp practice. And I think, again, the Packers are going to win this game. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it is more likely the Packers blow out the Eagles than the other way around. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's often how I think about these games. Like, okay, what is the more likely scenario in that interchange? And for me, it's clearly that the Packers, like, they look like the Super Bowl team, and the Eagles look like the team trying to find themselves that just hired 2 new coordinators, where the coach and the quarterback do not get along, all those things. So let's talk to Theo Ash. We will do that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have time or the resources to hire. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your mornings with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the Locked On NFL, the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me now from the Stay Hot podcast, the Pro Football Network. You have seen him, heard him on the Mina Kimes podcast a couple times now. Of course, featuring Lenny too. Don't want to leave out Lenny. And Theo, it's great to be with you. And this is a juicy matchup for the Packers to start here week 1. And I want to talk to you about some of the questions that I have trying to figure out as we head in here, because all week I've been going, okay, Jeff Hafley, he wants to blitz. He wants to live in this single high world. The thing about the Eagles is they could not handle pressure last year, but also the only good thing they could do really at the end of the year, especially, was hit deep shots, which you're leaving yourself a little bit vulnerable to do if you're playing all this single high coverage. Where do you see that push pull for the Packers, at least, cashing out? Like, what do you think is the smart way to handle this?
I think the smart way is to play the way that you are going to play all year. And under Hafley, that is man coverage. That is 6-man blitzes. It is living by the sword and dying by the sword. But it's what we have been asking for as Packer fans for a long time, sure, right? So I think regardless of the outcome, you've got to have an identity. And I think that this is going to be theirs. And I don't think it has to fail against the Eagles. Last year, they really struggled against the blitz, like you mentioned. They were one of the worst teams at dealing with it last season. The Bucs were able to crush them in the playoffs by blitzing. They weren't able to communicate. Wink Martindale, even, like, he doesn't design the most advanced pressure paths, I'd say. It's more band coverage on the back end, and then everybody just kind of goes. And that had a lot of success against Philadelphia at the end of last season. Now with Jason Kelce retired.
One of those guys.
And now Jalen Hurts being asked to set all the protections, which he hasn't been asked to do in the past. Like, blitzing could potentially be a very successful strategy. The problem is, of course, you're probably going to have to play the man behind it on 2 of the best man beaters in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like strength on strength and weakness on weakness, because you're at least, like, everything you mentioned, the way that Packer fans want their defense to play. You know, it's the joke about, like, even defensive players, they want to play like in Madden where you just call engage 8 every time. Like they want to play that way. And so now you see these players, they seem so excited to just go attack. They're not thinking, they're not, reading and reacting on blocks. They're just like, let's just go mess things up. And it seems like that philosophical difference, like even like the schematic stuff aside, just the philosophy difference seems like it's going to have dividends to pay here.
I hope so. And then it'll also help against the run, of course. Like the Eagles are no stranger to facing man coverage, even though they have these wideouts. Last season or 2 seasons ago when they were in the Super Bowl 2022, they faced more man coverage than anybody else in the league because you got to worry about Jalen Hurts. And now you've got to worry about Saquon Barkley. So you want bodies going downhill, not only to mess up the protection, but also to worry about that rushing attack.
Yeah, and the rushing attack could be even better. The last time the Packers saw this rushing attack, they gave up over 350 yards just on the ground, and route to 40 points. Like I understand Joe Barry is not in the building anymore, but man, like that was one of those games where you just go, does anyone have any pride? Like, what are we doing here?
Seriously, it'll take more than scheme. It'll take discipline from the front four. We can't have people stunting when they're not supposed to, or leaving their gap trying to make a play just to have Saquon Barkley set them up and then disappear through the hole they were supposed to be defending. So blitzing can help, like numbers in the box can help, but also you've got to tackle and you've got to stay where you're supposed to be, which could be a defensive coordinator thing, but the players have to do their part as well.
Yeah. What do you see as the safety's role in all of this? Because it sounds like it's not just going to be, not just going to stick Xavier McKinney back there and say, okay, you're Earl Thomas now. Like you're going to patrol the deep middle, 80 snaps a game. So how do you see that shaking out in terms of how they're going to use those guys? Because I think especially in a game like this, where you're going to need whoever's back there, if they are in a single high, to be able to roam sideline to sideline. How do you think they're best utilized with Javon Bullard and maybe even Evan Williams and some 3 safety looks?
I like the idea of a big nickel. I think the weak point in the secondary right now is Nixon in the slot. Williams was super impressive in the preseason, so I don't exactly know how it'll look, but I would be very curious to see all 3 safeties on the field in a big nickel look. And then I think it's a smart idea to play if you're with a single high safety, like cheat over to AJ Brown's side, maybe the best man cover wide receiver in the entire league. Like whoever is on him, give him a little bit of help. And then, there's going to be a lot of weak safety blitzes. If they're going to play single high and have a guy down in the box, you'll want him coming downhill. Maybe you can get a sack or some other havoc play. I'll be curious to see. I guess I don't know exactly. We won't know until the game kicks off. It'll be a new defense.
Yeah, that's the part that's crazy about all of this is we're speculating right now, and I think even after week 1, we're going to go, okay, that was week 1. The Eagles are a unique challenge. It may look different moving forward, and that's the problem with just using one game as an evaluation tool. I was looking back at the numbers, Theo, and Joe Barry versus Jeff Hafley last year. Jeff Hafley sent a DB as a pressure player 8 times more often than Joe Barry last year. I wonder if that's something where, okay, you're going to play that big nickel and maybe on early downs, you're sending one of those guys just as a run blitzer, just to say, okay, even though we're playing lighter, that lighter body is going to have to be a force player here. And we're going to send him just to create a little bit of extra chaos.
For sure. And that's the defensive meta that we could be seeing a lot this year. Kyle Hamilton comes to mind in that role. There are a few others that have CJ Gardner-Johnson, I feel like, has done that. Brian Branch, he was a safety in college, came down and played that nickel spot, created a ton of big plays for the Lions on defense starting week 1 last year. So I think teams are finding that you can have a lot of success by blending that linebacker, safety, corner all into one guy and putting him as an overhang. And I think that Evan Williams showed enough in the preseason that he should be on the field in a couple packages in that role.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see that a ton, but I'm with you. I think it would be really cool. I've said I think that their primary defense as a big nickel would make sense to me. But I think that's also going to be matchup dependent in a lot of ways. Let's flip it over to the offense for a second. I know Matt LaFleur is going to vomit as we have this conversation. I'm not going to ask you if the Packers have a wide receiver 1. Let me ask it this way. Who's the best receiver on this roster?
I think the best... It's tough to say. I think the most productive is going to be Jaden Reed. I'll say that. I think that I feel pretty good about calling him the fantasy wide receiver one, or someone who's going to lead the team in targets and yards. He did have the highest target rate when he was on the field of any player last year in their receiver room. He did lead them in yardage as a rookie. He's going into year 2. I think as a slot weapon, he is the most intriguing to me, followed by maybe Wicks. And I know that he's the 4th guy on the roster, but his size, his route running, I mean, his efficiency last year just blew everybody else out of the water. He's another guy that I think the 2 rookies from last season, maybe I'm rookie biased, right? The young player always, who knows what could it be?
The new shiny toy always catches our eye, right?
But, it's the most efficient guy and kind of the most productive guy. So it's not crazy.
Yeah, and you mentioned the productivity from Jaden Reed, 2nd in catches of 15 plus from the slot last year, 3rd in yards from the slot, despite having the 7th most catches from the slot. So he was able to create vertically from the slot, which is something that I was not sure he was going to be able to do in the NFL. Was that something that surprised you, that he was able to be as effective winning vertically as he was?
No, I think that was kind of his game, is that speedy threat. I liked watching him and Keon Coleman together at Michigan State, and Reed was kind of that speedier downfield. Well, they were both downfield threats, just in different ways, but he always had the juice, I thought. It doesn't necessarily surprise me. He's not like a big Amon-Ra St. Brown type, where it's more underneath and turn up field and get yak. He is a little bit slighter and faster.
Why do you I want to ask you about the Packers version of this too, but there's been a lot made of Sean McVay saying, hey, we want to change the way we run the ball. We want to lean into away a little bit from the outside zone and into some of these other power concepts, these gap runs. Why do you, can you explain why you think that is, and why he's talked about it, but why does that work?
I think it's just because it's easier to get yards going north and south than east and west. I think you saw the downsides of running like exclusively wide zone, or at least I saw it with the Falcons last year. Like Bijan Robinson, extremely talented player, but he was always going east and west. I think that you need a little bit of that downhill pressure. And then teams want you to run between like they don't want to see how fast you are running to the sideline. They want to see how tough you are running north and south. So teams are kind of sitting on these wide zone concepts a little bit as it's taken over the league. They're cheating their defensive tackles in a little bit farther in one direction to prevent them from getting reached, right? So if defenses are making adjustments, eventually as an offense, you got to adjust. So if you run wide zone, and that's the offensive meta, the defenses are going to evolve, and now it's your turn to evolve as an offense. And I do think that that's why McVay and some of these others are probably going to get a little bit away from the wide zone type of philosophy. Even Arthur Smith, who ran it almost like exclusively last year, if he's going to have any success in Pittsburgh, will have to run a little bit more downhill than he did last year. So that's my take on it.
All right, more Theo Ash here to come on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks, the #1 daily fantasy sports app. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Plus, PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out of a lineup even if it's not perfect. You can still double your money. So even if one of your picks doesn't come in, you can still 2x your money. So download PrizePicks today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win or receive the win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts and get unprecedented NFL insight. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Yeah, we were talking with Dusty Evely earlier in the week about this, and one of the things that struck me watching Marshawn Lloyd is I was watching that running game going, this is actually something that I think the Packers could lean into a lot, where the scheme is sort of all looks like zone except for one man. It's like a one-man power. And you've got it's like zone with a puller, something like that. And like, okay, that's the kind of stuff Josh Jacobs is good at. That's the kind of stuff that Marshawn Lloyd is good at. That was the kind of stuff that AJ Dillon was good at. And it makes you wonder if Matt LaFleur always kind of wanted to lean into this a little bit more and just didn't have the bodies to do it. Like, could we see that transition in Green Bay coming?
It would be cool. I'd be down to see it. I think that when I watch a Matt LaFleur offense, I want to see at least one of every type of run by the end of the game. It's kind of a haunted house for defenses when you're going up against Matt LaFleur. You never know what could pop out at you, like an end around. He loves doing that. He loves weirdness or zone read with Jordan Love. I want to see that. I want to see power and counter with pullers. I want to see wide zone, mid zone, inside zone. I want a little bit of everything from him this year. The last thing I think LaFleur should be is one-dimensional. So yeah, if Marshawn Lloyd is good at a certain type of run, like I think LaFleur can dream it up. So I'm definitely with you there.
What kind of answers do you expect Philadelphia to have against pressure? Because that's been the mandate for Kellen Moore. Hey, come in, make sure that if they have to play hot, that they can do that. There are these answers there. You mentioned some of the issues with, okay, Jalen Hurts has got to now set the protections in addition to all the other pre-snap stuff that a quarterback has on his plate. You don't have a future Hall of Famer doing that all for you. Remember the great play pre-snap, Jalen Hurts calling out, trying to change the play at the line of scrimmage. Kelsey's basically like, enough, we're not doing that. Like he basically called him off like a pitcher giving the shake sign to the catcher. What do you think some of these answers could be, which is another way of saying, what do the Packers have to be ready for?
I mean, you got to be ready for the quick hitters, the slants, the RPOs, things like that, to get the ball out of Hurts's hands quickly and beat the man coverage, get the ball in the hands of the playmakers who can make something happen with the yak. And then I think running the ball as well. Like they were very unbalanced at the end of last year. Like they had DeAndre Swift, they had Jalen Hurts, but they were passing it at a record rate. I think some of the ways that they can alleviate the amount of pressure looks that they're seeing is by dropping the amount that they're dropping back and passing it all. And I think that that's what Saquon Barkley is partially there to do, is just take some of the pressure off of Hurts and make it so, you can't just pin your ears back and get after the quarterback.
I asked this question rhetorically the other day. I think it was on a stream. I said, okay, what does a Kellen Moore offense consistently look like? What do they do well? What is your answer to that question?
I think one of the things that has always been impressive about Moore is his balance. Like even when they were in Dallas and they had Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, he was definitely focused on running those zone plays. He liked to have two tight ends out there on the field and run the ball in that way. And I think that that's kind of something that Moore is going to provide that the Eagles have been missing.
He's also been very good at creating yards after catch. I went back and just before we hopped on here, the Chargers last year under Kellen Moore were 5th in yards after catch, total yards. That seems impossible to me, given the receivers that they have there from a talent standpoint and a traits standpoint. And then I went back and looked in Dallas. 3 out of the 4 years he was their offensive coordinator, they were a top 10 team in yards created after the catch. It seems like from that standpoint, he is perfect, might be overselling it, but a good candidate to come in here and get them back to doing that, because back in 2022, that was how they killed teams. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith with a chance to make plays after the catch.
Definitely. And if you can tie those, if you're going to be balanced and you can tie those run plays to play action and bring the linebackers up, that is a great way to generate yak. And I'm shocked by that Chargers stat you just said, because I'm right with you. Like I would never have expected that those Chargers receivers to be able to do that. With the Cowboys, it makes sense because CeeDee Lamb might be the best yak guy in the league, but for him to do it with LA, yeah, that's a good point.
Do you think the Eagles could or might need to lean into more of the RPO game that they were using earlier in their career? Like ironically, that was the thing that everyone was saying, okay, what is the next evolution of that offense? We've seen it. But now it seems like, to your point earlier, they may need to go back to some of that to create some of those, like, hey, let's see whether it's a true RPO or just, hey, a little play action from the gun and it's a glance to get AJ Brown the ball with a chance to make a play.
So much of that left with Steichen, I feel like. Like
Yeah.
you always want it to stay around because I think Hurts is comfortable with it. But at the same time, if Steichen was the RPO guy and he's gone, like you do kind of gotta stick to your new identity. So I think that it will be a part of the game plan, but I don't think it will ever get back to the levels. And I really don't think the Eagles offense will ever get back to the levels that they were at in 2022.
Yeah, it does seem like Shane Steichen, like the amount of credit given to the different coaches going back to the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. It seems like we've gotten it wrong for a lot of that time because it was like, oh, Frank Reich, he did all this stuff. And then we've seen Frank Reich coach and it's like, I don't know about that. John DeFilippo, hey, he's this quarterback guru. Are you sure about that? And now we may be seeing that, hey, Nick Sirianni, he's this great coach. Actually, now it seems like it was the other guy doing that thing. And so we'll see what Nick Sirianni actually does here. Last thing that I want to get your take on here. I feel like we haven't talked enough about the tight ends and in Green Bay, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, and they showed appealing skills last year and different skills where Luke Musgrave is your big, tall, fast, like he can run those corner routes, those deep over routes, seam routes, and Tucker Kraft can be your dirty work guy. They fit so well together. Is there a version of this offense they can unlock with these two guys in 12 personnel, both of them on the field at once?
Yeah, I think so. And it's also an opportunity to get different wide receivers involved as well when you're into your 12 personnel package.
Right.
Can be different groups than 11 personnel. Like if you want to get Wicks on the field, for example, I think in that big touchdown he had versus the Cleveland Browns in the preseason, he wasn't out there in 11 personnel, but then in 12 personnel, he was. So not only are you getting both of those tight ends out there, it's just a different way to get all the different receivers involved. And yeah, I absolutely believe that both of those guys play into it kind of like the wide receivers do. It's like there's really no one to key in on because everybody in the receiving core is pretty good. So yeah, 12 personnel, I think could be a great weapon for them this year.
Well, and we saw them do it a little bit last year. You line Luke Musgrave up in the slot, you have Jaden Reed outside, and then you use that little cheat motion to give Jaden Reed a running start. And now you had a corner. Okay, how are they going to pass that off? How are they aligning pre-snap? Did they have a safety over Luke Musgrave? And it gives you a lot of different ways to fudge the matchups, to play with the matchups, to get, okay, now you've got a linebacker running with a corner, or you've got to make these quick decisions on the back end.
Absolutely. And that's the great thing about Green Bay this year is I think that there's just unlimited different combinations that you can do, all with about equal effectiveness, because you've got 6 players who are all pretty similar caliber, I'd say, but
Yeah, I think you're right.
with no weaknesses.
What ultimately decides this game in Brazil on Friday night?
I think it's going to be the secondary. I think we've been asking, can they handle man coverage? And we will see if they can tackle and if they can be disruptive. I think the Packers will win, but if it's a horror show and AJ Brown goes for 200 yards, then we're going to be in trouble. I think I'm very confident in the offense to move the ball on a team who's pretty weak at the linebacker spot. I think that's something LaFleur can kind of feast on. They ranked in the bottom 5 in defensive DVOA last year. So the offense, I think, will be able to move the ball, but it's the defense where I have all the questions.
And score touchdowns in the red zone. If you can make sure you're not settling for field goals, even if Braden Arvison, the new kicker that everyone loves, is making them, you need to be able to score touchdowns because when the Eagles get down there, they're really good at this, especially in close. Theo, appreciate the time, man, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again.
Of course. Go Pack, go.
All right, Packers and Eagles tonight. We will be live after the game on our YouTube page. Go follow us over there on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter so you get the alert that I'm going live over there. Wherever you find the podcast, you'll find us also on social media, on Instagram, on TikTok, so you can stay locked on Packers.